So this talk is about Albert Einstein. Obviously, of any of the case studies, this is probably the best known genius and certainly a very creative person. But in this talk, I want us to think of him much more as just a human being, an ordinary guy. And in many parts of his life, he was a pretty ordinary guy. So it's good to get an insight into this incredible level of creativity coming out of someone that might not always have been expected to produce that. So Albert Einstein was born in Munich in Germany, and he was born to a fairly affluent family. His dad, Hermann, was a businessman. His dad had always wanted to be an engineer, and he loved science and engineering. But in his generation in Germany, there were a limited number of slots for Jewish kids to go to the schools that taught engineering. And of course he was Jewish, and so that greatly restricted his opportunity. And so Hermann Einstein, his father, did not go to college and did not get a degree in engineering, as he certainly would have been capable of doing and wanted to do. So always he wanted, his son to have opportunities that he did not have. But Einstein would have been born in 1879. It just lets you know that prejudice that we think of in Nazi Germany, that was there in Germany against the Jews for decades and decades beforehand. But Hermann Einstein was a very successful businessman. He had a younger brother who was also really interested in being an engineer. And even in just the few years between Hermann going to school and his brother going to school, they let more Jewish kids in. And so his brother did get to be an engineer and got educated as an engineer. And then the two of them formed this company, and they were producing electricity. And this was back in the early days of electrification, where a small operation, a small company, could make a power producing plant and maybe supply 5,000, 10,000 homes with electricity. And that's the way electricity was produced. It wasn't mega engineering operations like are all over the world today. So that was in Munich, and he made a really good living. The money to invest in that company had come from Einstein's mother, Pauline. Her family was quite successful. They'd made a lot of money in grain. They were also a Jewish family. She was very social. She had her buddies. She played a lot of bridge. She never had any kind of career interest or educational interest. And that was actually always for Einstein a little curious. He wasn't sure why his mother would want to live a life as he said, indolent as she did. So as a little kid, actually at the very beginning, his verbal skills were not very good. So they actually thought he was a little slow. But that's just because it was his verbal skills. Inside his head, things were clicking really well. And when at the age of 5 or 6 he did begin to develop much better verbal skills, then they realized this kid is really smart. And he always was really smart. He was especially smart in math and science, where he just knocked the top out of it. But he actually graduated from high school early, and he wanted to go to college 2 years early. And he took all the entrance exams, and he just whizzed through in math and science, but not completely whizzed through in the more verbal sides of education. And so he didn't get in 2 years early. Instead, he just got in 1 year early. And in the interim, he really worked on his verbal skills. And that was to stand him in really good stead later. He also was always very fond of music. He played the violin. His family got him violin lessons from a very early age. And he loved the violin, and he played the violin almost every day of his life, all the way through his adulthood. And he was very good at the violin. That was a real passion for him. And he also began to have broader interests. He, oddly enough, we don't think of that guy with the wild ass hair, but he was really quite good looking when he was younger, and he was quite a ladies' man. That kind of got him into a little bit of trouble sometimes. I was actually very friendly, kind of gregarious guy, and he did well socially as well as academically. And at the age of 17, a little early, he went to Zurich Polytechnic. That would have been one of the very best schools in Europe at the time for technical things. It kind of would have been the M.I.T. of Europe. And he was going to major in mathematics and physics. And he was then thrown into a coterie of fellow students who he just really adored. We mentioned in an earlier lecture Michelangelo Beso, who was a classmate of his there and became a lifelong friend. And I guess they were kind of nerds, but kind of cool nerds who were there at Zurich Polytechnic. This later became known as ETH. It still is one of the very best universities in Europe, and very much focused still on technology, engineering, mathematics, physics, things like that. So something kind of comes up, though, in his period at Zurich Polytechnic. He begins to develop a kind of, insolence and a kind of rebellion against his teachers in particular, and a kind of resistance to authority and to the education they were giving him. So he got to be kind of known as a difficult student, and one that was challenging, and often was a little arrogant, especially toward his instructors. So part of his impudence and kind of resistance to his professors probably came from the fact that he was Jewish, and he was in a context, even at ETH, that had a lot of prejudice, and he was not getting a fair shake. They were definitely discriminating against this bright Jewish kid, and other kids that were not Jewish were getting more favorable treatment. So he maybe began to have a little bit more independent attitude. I've got to do this for myself, because I'm not going to get the same kind of help that these other kids are getting. When he was a little kid, his dad had given him a compass, and he was just really fascinated with that compass and the way it worked. And he began to think much more deeply, maybe, about physics and about science, and to rely more on his own powers of observation, and not just book learning about physics and about mathematics, but really thinking himself, researching himself, independently learning about these things. Because the learning he was getting from the professors, in his mind, they were not giving him a fair shake, and he was not getting what other people were getting, especially in terms of things like mentorship. So it began to, I think, infuse a lot of aspects of his life. He was a little impudent to his professors. He was a little impudent to his mom in particular. He thought she was a lazy-ass, indolent woman. About the time he went to college, his father's business actually failed in Munich. And this was because the big dogs were now producing electricity in large quantities, like Siemens and AEG, and the little guys couldn't compete anymore in Germany. So he and his brother moved their business to Milan in Italy, where still the little guys were more in control of things. His mom moved down there as well. She didn't have her network of people in Germany and her family. And when Einstein would visit in Milan, he thought his mom was indolent. She was lazy. He was very critical of her. So he begins to be this kind of skeptical, insolent critical kind of guy as well. And that was in his personal life as well as with his professors. He got very, very good grades. He got the top grades in his class at ETH. But when it came to his research project for his PhD, he got one of the lower grades on his research project. And he got a lower grade because he had to work with this professor, and it was this professor's judgment. And there's probably a little prejudice there of that professor against someone like Albert Einstein. So Einstein graduates from college about age 21, and he starts to try to get a job. And that's where he began to run into some real significant problems. He was trying to get a job at first as a university professor, but he needed letters of recommendation. And obviously they wanted to hear from your dissertation advisor and people like that. And they wouldn't give him a high letter of recommendation. And when they looked back at his class ranking, although he made the very best grades on tests because of his grades on individual research projects, he graduated 4th in a class of 5 in his PhD group. And the person who graduated 5th in that class was a woman named Mileva Merrick, who she and Einstein were a couple. Now, in those days, shacking up together, that wasn't a really accepted thing. And so there was a real stigma against that, but they did anyway. And she and Einstein kind of got to be a group. She was suffering prejudice because she was a woman. He was suffering prejudice because he was Jewish. Both of them were super smart, but probably weren't getting the credit they deserved. So as he tries to get a job as a faculty member in a university, it's just not working. And he tries and tries and tries. Then he thinks, okay, well, maybe I set my sights too high. I'll try to get a job in a good private school, in a good physics or mathematics department in a private secondary school. But then it turned out they also wanted those same kind of letters of recommendation. And when they went back to his faculty members, they would say, no, the guy is he's insolent. He thinks too highly of himself. He would miss class and then come in at the last minute, and okay, he aced the test, but he missed class. He's not a serious student. So he couldn't get a job even in a secondary school. So he began to do some private tutoring. About that time, Mileva Merrick gets pregnant. And so they're going to have a kid. And they decide to go ahead and have the kid. They're not going to get married, but they're going to go ahead and have the kid. This, of course, was not the right thing to do in a good Jewish family. It was a huge embarrassment to his mother and his parents. And he was shameful in his behavior there. He also was not terribly responsible to Mileva Merrick. He accepted the fact that they were having this kid. He took responsibility for the kid. He did not want to get married, and he was, kind of separated himself from Mileva Merrick a bit too. Eventually, they did get married, but shortly after they got divorced. So they were better probably as academic colleagues than they were as a real couple. Another thing Einstein did was he actually kind of rejected his cultural heritage or his national heritage. He gave up his German citizenship when he went to school in Switzerland. He applied for Swiss citizenship, but he was having a hard time getting that. He didn't want Italian citizenship. For a while, he was a man with no country. He also, now he's applying for jobs, and one of the jobs that looks like it's got some promise is a job with a patent office in Switzerland. And this is a government organization. And in order to get this job, he has to have citizenship. So he's hampered by the fact that he's been so rebellious about his citizenship that he has no country. He's been so rebellious to his professors that he can't get the kind of job he wanted to get. He's been so rebellious to his family that he's a little alienated from them. He's been so rebellious to his wife that now they're getting a divorce. He's a little alone. But in some ways, that's intellectually where he wanted to be. He began even to take the major physicists of his time, people like James Clerk Maxwell, or the immediate time before him, James Clerk Maxwell, or people like Max Planck, these great physicists. And he began to speak skeptically about their work. Now, he certainly was building his ideas in physics on the work of James Clerk Maxwell and Max Planck, but he didn't see them as gods. He didn't see them as these hugely respectable kind of infallible figures. He was skeptical, and he was a bit insolent with them as well. And it began to make other physicists in his circle shy away from him a little bit. How could you not love these guys who are the gods of our field? And the people who had been his teachers. Paul Drude was one of his teachers. He wrote a very critical article about some work that Paul Drude had done. Really pissed off Paul Drude, the guy who had been his thesis advisor, Alfred Kleiner. He also was very critical of him publicly and verbally, kind of abused him, and alienated Alfred Kleiner. But all of this is putting him in an intellectual place where he is an independent thinker, and that he is really addressing physics not through a formal education system, not through these professors or mentors he might have had, not through the great gods of physics, but really depending on his own observational capabilities. There are two quotations from him I want to read, and these were things he said over and over. He said, "Blind respect for authority is the enemy of truth." Blind respect for authority is the enemy of truth. Now, I want us to talk about this in the check-in. I want to know whether you think that's true. Is it wrong to have blind respect for authority? Should we be skeptical of authority? And that's not to say we don't accept it sometimes, but we don't accept it blindly. We don't accept it just because they are the authority. And then the other thing he said over and over was, "Long live impudence. It's my guardian angel in the world." So he didn't see that impudence he was exhibiting as a bad thing. He saw that as, that keeps me independent in my thinking. It keeps me skeptical of the world around me. And those were kind of watchwords for him at the beginning of his career. So of course we find him now, he's in a kind of rough place. He's got a job, but that job is certainly not a very challenging job. What he did in the patents office was somebody would apply for a patent, he'd take the application, he'd check through previous patents. Does it duplicate something that's there before? Is it really original work? It's pretty much monkey see, monkey do work, but it's a job and it's paying the bills. But it also is not a very demanding job intellectually, so that he has time to think for himself. He even has time sometimes on the job when things are slow in the patent office, that he's able to do his own work there. And one thing that's really interesting is this independence he has makes him feel like, this is my work. It's my motivation. This is motivation 3.0. I'm doing this because I have a passion for physics, and I'm exploring these new ideas and new ways of seeing physics because it comes from within me. And that's very much a motivation for Einstein. So in the next talk, we're going to be looking at some real specific lessons we can learn from Einstein about creative thought. But I think you can see from what we've been talking about here in his life and in his personal attitudes, that rebelliousness, which we've talked about over and over, was incredibly key for Einstein. Also, he was always optimistic I can do this. I'm a smart guy. I don't have to rely on authority or other people. I can be independent because something good is going to come out of this. He had that kind of optimism. So we'll check back in with Einstein in the next talk.